There is apple farm down through there, the apples and everything else is just incredible. Well, it's 7 p.m.
We just grew
Do
cold.
you know where your children are?
Yeah,
you do.
at home in my pool.
Anthracite, right?
Anthracite coal.
That's right.
Well, that would be a good thing to have this winter.
Tell me.
Nice, clean burning
We
coal.
used to heat our house with it out in western Pennsylvania. Can I call the meeting to order, please? Peter, would you call the roll, please?
Hold on 1 minute, let's just
Sure.
make sure we're
You
on
all set?
We're on the record.
No, okay, I'm sorry. You give me the, tell me when.
Go back to this. Check this.
They just did something.
No, it's not. It only works when I hold it. You want to hold it all
I
night?
told you how to fix them.
No. Okay,
We're running again.
we're on. Let's start the meeting.
Okay. Call her. Peter, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Carlo Morano. Joan Mead.
Here.
Mary Comstock. Paul Swenson. Here. Diane Cervello.
Here.
Edward Torian. Here. Robert King.
Here.
Mary Cronin.
Here.
Peter, would you be so kind as to read the minutes, please?
The minutes from the last meeting, Monday, July 14th of 2008. The commission had discussion and accepted with small revision the minutes from June 23rd of 2008. The commission heard input from the public. Mr. Joel Uri spoke in favor of a separate planning and zoning commissions and in favor of 4-year terms if every elected official was going to have a 4-year term. Warren Levy spoke against combining the planning and zoning commissions. He spoke in favor of eliminating the city clerk's position. He also believes that the council needs a staff. He also submitted a letter, which I circulated among the members. Gregory Marciano spoke in favor of an annual dollar cap on non-referendum bonding. Margaret Mitchell spoke about capital budget process and the need to overhaul the present way it's conducted. Elise Marciano spoke about the city clerk's positions being outdated and requiring a more specific job description and duties. Lynn Waller spoke against combining the planning and zoning commissions as it would help neither the developers nor the neighbors. She was also in favor of retaining the city treasurer's office and in favor of eliminating the city clerk. Mr. Al Robinson spoke about, I believe he spoke about the statutory requirements for municipalities to publish legal notices in newspapers of the largest circulation, and he referred us to statutory sections of the Connecticut General Statutes. The commission then had a discussion of the role of city treasurer and voted on a motion to retain the office of city treasurer 4-2. In favor were Mead, Comstock, Torian, Cervello, opposed Bezade and Swenson. The commission agreed to invite the present council president to the next meeting. As an aside, Mr. King, I spoke to Mr. Cabo. He was unavailable to attend tonight's meeting. He told me he'd like to come to the first meeting in August.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Continuing on with the minutes, we had a discussion, we had input and the presence of Mayor Boughton. He spoke regarding the combining of planning and zoning commissions. We discussed that the plan of development recommended combining the commissions, and the city council adopted the plan of development specifically with the provision that the planning and zoning commissions be combined. We discussed that the combination would make the process more efficient for developers and should lead to better and stronger zoning regulations. The mayor was also finally in favor of making both the combined planning and zoning commission elective. We, after discussion and after input from the mayor, voted to keep the zoning commission separate and the planning commission separate. And we voted on that motion, and that motion was to combine the planning and zoning commissions. In favor of the motion, Bezade, Mead, and Swenson. Opposed were Torian, Comstock, Cervello, and Morano. Please make those changes.
Got it.
The commission then had discussion with the mayor and among the members regarding the length of term of office for elected position. The mayor discussed the significance of a longer term for the implementation of long-term policies, programs, and projects that are necessary and important for Danbury going forward. He pointed out that in Danbury's history, the 2-year term of office, then the biannual election, and the ever-costly political campaigns created a political environment where long-term projects and decisions were easily avoided. Other issues such as the learning curve for elected officials once they attain office, and then shortly afterward have to campaign and to keep the position were also discussed. The commission voted to retain the current 2-year terms of office by rejecting a motion to extend the term of office of elected officials from 4 years to 4 years from 2. That motion was rejected 4-2. In favor of the motion, this is in favor of the 4-year term, Meade and Cervello opposed, Bezade, Swenson, Turian, and Comstock. The commission then unanimously voted to discuss the non-referendum bonding proposals by the mayor. He was submitted those. I think those were circulated to everybody.
Thank you.
The commission had input and discussion with the mayor regarding his bonding proposal and the changes he would make to sections 7-10, 7-5, and 7-3E of the city charter. The commission agreed to discuss at the next meeting the preamble and a proposal to add language requiring a periodic review of the charter, as well as language regarding charter section 6-9. With some changes, those are the minutes.
Are there any other changes? None. Therefore, we'll accept the minutes as read. Peter, thank you very much for preparing these. I know it's a pain in the neck job, but your efforts are greatly appreciated. Welcome to the public. If anybody would care to address the commission, we would be so pleased.
My name's Reed Mitchell. My family owns several pieces of property in Danbury. I feel like I know you because I've watched you on the TV for 4 or 5 sessions or something while we were out of town the first when you got started. One of the things I've noticed is that we're suffering from one of the particular institutions in New England. And that particular institution happens to be the town meeting. And a lot of people who are native to this area look around and see that the adjoining town still are running referendums or votes on the budget itself, never mind bonding issues. So there's a lot of feeling that the citizens, even though we have a representative form of government, we want to have input to the financial aspects of the government. Now, personally, I grew up in a town, in a city where we had a city manager and a city council, which was nonpartisan. So one of the things I notice here is we have a strong mayor who's elected and a council that's partisan. If you were to go back over and look at the votes over the years.
Mr. Mitchell, excuse me for that. Okay.
So, if you look at the votes over the years, most of the time when there's a division in votes, they run along party lines. Because the parties try to get everybody in their party to vote alike. They aren't always successful, but in general, that's what happens. Okay, so I watched last session when the mayor came in, and apparently answering the public outcry, or at least outcry before you guys, that people wanted a cap on the amount of bonding that did not have to go to referendum. So the first thing he did is he offered a yearly cap on the bonding that didn't need to go to referendum. The second thing he offered was a cleanup in the language, which probably was necessary to understand if and when we ever have to execute an emergency funding of something. But the third thing was really counteracting what the first one was, to cap the annual bonding that does not need to go to referendum. He suggested a priority list, and he gave out a figure of 10%, which he said was 20 million, which is of course really $30 million worth of stuff. But if it's on the priority list and is okayed by the staff which he appoints, and the planning commission which he appoints, then it needs 2/3 vote of the common council. Well, in a partisan setup, council often votes, most of the time, votes along party lines. So most of the time I've been in town since 1986, the council has been dominated by a single party that is the same as the mayor's. So once the mayor suggests something like that, my feeling is it will go through. Okay, the council very rarely bucks the mayor. Okay, end of that topic. Okay. Again, reflecting on my background, the mayor here, when I first came here, everybody said, if you want something done, go to the mayor's office. And I thought, well, why do you go to the mayor's office? You got all this other, you got city staff, you got this and that. Well, the mayor is very powerful. Okay, everybody thinks that their council people have something to say. They do. But if you want something done, you go to the mayor's office. So if you think that the council needs more strength, one of the things I could suggest to you is that the mayor not chair the council meetings. Chairing a meeting where it's political gives the person in charge a lot of leeway to maneuver things. So I was glad to see that you, at least initially, rejected the 4-year terms, because people so easily get reelected that if there is a learning curve whenever you take on a job, whether it be an administrative job or a legislative job, there is a learning curve. But people get so easily reelected that I don't think it's a sacrifice to have them run every 2 years. Very rarely does somebody get defeated. Occasionally, you get a big a big change, sea change, and you get a new mayor and you get a whole bunch of new council people. But in general, people get reelected year after year. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Any other? Lynn?
Don't have a lot of time to write things, had a really busy week with a neighbor. One of the things that I question is with the mayor's presentation last time on capital improvements, when he talked about 10% of the estimated cost of all projects contained in the capital program, that's $30 million. That's a lot of money. And it scares the pants off of me who can't afford to live here in this town now. If we start doing that on an annual basis, we're going to be well behind the 8 ball. He kind of offhandedly said, well, you could bring it down to 5% instead of 10, but that's 16 to 17 million per year with no approval by the public. This is under the part that is the part of the capital budget that he suggested that we try to work into the bonding each year, and I'm just concerned about the quantity of money. I also wasn't sure whether the high priority list would come from the planning commission or the planning department. I have the feeling it should come from the planning commission. The other thing I was disappointed to hear you all say, and granted it was after I had left, I have such trouble with my legs, I leave early, that you did not plan to take up or don't expect to take up the number of signatures needed on a petition for a referendum. I think you all feel that only time that people would use the ability of a referendum is for the budget. I believe you can referend ordinances or other things that the government does if you're really bothered by it. There's no sense to referend the budget because I believe that if we were lucky enough to get all of the signatures and went to referendum and voted down the mayor's budget, it just automatically goes back to his budget of April 7th. So we accomplish nothing. I don't know if it's in a state statute or if it's in the charter, but that's what happens. So people are not going to be referending a budget because you accomplish nothing. But at the moment, in the charter, it states that we need 15% of the registered voters to get a petition together to petition for any ordinances or anything like that. I called the registrar's office today, and there are 30,600 registered voters in the city of Danbury. That means 4,590 people would have to sign a petition, all registered, all accurate. So you really need 5,000 or more signatures within 30 days. I don't think any of you have ever tried to do that, but I did. And it's darn near impossible. Actually, it is impossible. It took me 6 months. I didn't know there was a 30-day cap on it. So it took me 6 months to get enough signatures. I find it discouraging, and I'm really discouraged that you're not even willing to talk about lowering it to 10% or 5% or something that's more doable for the general public if they want to. Some of the things that came up last year was the sex offender ordinance, the parade ordinance, and I don't think 287G was an ordinance, it was just a resolution. But all of these things might have been petitioned if the number was down reasonable enough that people, the public, could have a say. And it is our only means of having access to the government besides talking to an individual person. And just as Mr. Mitchell said, most of the councilmen vote with the mayor when they're on the side of the mayor. So it's very difficult to be heard. I think this is a method of closing out the public, as all of these methods of financing, closing out the public for the bond. Because if you allow access to $30 million, why would you ever have to go to referendum? Why would the public ever have a say in anything that goes on in this city other than electing a councilman? Thank you. Oh, one other thing. I know you're down to very few meetings. A lot of this stuff is really important. Maybe you should be meeting more often and try to have a few more meetings so that we can accomplish a little bit more of what's important here, because this really is the constitution of our city. Thank you.
That's something that we will address. Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Lynn. Are there any other comments?
Al Robinson, 92 Osborne Street.
Welcome.
I don't know if this is the appropriate setting. I'll ask this question first. Is there any way I can find information pertaining to when you requested the city clerk to come and come before this commission? The date of that, the date of that request?
The date, I think there were several. Peter, can you?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head.
I think there were several
It might be in the
requests,
minutes.
Mr.
Provide some
Robinson.
contact information if I can get that from you at a later point in time.
Sure. It might be in the minutes, I don't know.
I think the first time she was scheduled to come, and she was ill and could not come. Another time she was requested to come, and there was a conflict of schedule. She did come a few weeks ago, and I recall, and it's just from recall, it was probably a week to 10 days in advance of her coming. So she did come the third time when we requested her.
Right. I'll address I don't have enough time in my presentation about the city clerk's position, why I feel that it should be eliminated and replaced with a civil service position. It will take way too much time. I think I'm going to present it in written form with a CD and bring it in the next meeting. I do feel that after hearing what the mayor said about the bond, putting a cap on the bond, I think it's even more important that there should just be a yearly cap on this bonding. If you want to make it 2.5, fine. I'm very happy with 500,000, but if 2.5 is fine per year, then it should be that way. Capital projects going in excess of tens of millions of dollars, and he has the ability to do it per year. It really scares me a lot. And I think personally, we're just bonded enough in the city as it is. Also, the elected positions, I'm happy that it was kept at 2 years. Thinking of previous mayors, this present mayor right now is probably on his 4th term. Mayor Eric was ran for 6 terms. Mr. Dyer went for multiple terms, so the 2-year argument just doesn't pass the smell test, because you have once you're in office as an incumbent, it's very, very difficult to vote you out. Extremely difficult, unless you have an indictment or something. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Robinson? Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the comment?
Can I take a second bite?
Just a moment, please, Mr. Mitchell. Warren?
No.
I'll allow you 2 minutes, please, but we need to move on.
This is a completely different topic. This is about the dissemination of information in the city. When the Plan of Conservation and Development came up, you try and get a hold of a copy of it, you can't, okay? Nobody, you can check with the library or get somebody. If you're important, somebody may loan you a copy. But if you're the public and you want to take it home and read it, because it's a fairly lengthy document, it's very difficult. I suggested that the plan be amended to make somewhere in the plan there'd be a way to make information available. They didn't want to change the plan because it was already written and it was in their head. Well, that's what goes on here. Once things are written and formed and it's time for the public input, the public is really disregarded because everybody's formed up the thing they want to happen. And if you come out of left field with something, so if you can squeak in different places, try to make it easy for the public to get copies of things, I appreciate that. You could ask this gentleman how many times my wife came down to his office and said she couldn't get something because some clerk didn't want to give it up. So thank you.
Thank you for your opinion, Mr. Mitchell. Moving on. As soon as I find my agenda. Thank you. I've got one here that moves.
Thanks for keeping me honest.
Before we start, I just would like to share a thought for your consideration. The chairman is not here tonight. In effect, then there is 2 votes that will be absent because I can only vote in case of a tie. I would ask you, out of consideration for those who are not here, mainly the chairman, that we defer any voting on any items on the agenda tonight. It is your pleasure. I will follow whatever you wish to do. Okay? The next thing on the agenda is the charter language on bonding. And I presume what we're referring to is the mayor's recommendation? Is that correct, Peter?
That's correct. It's referring to specific sections of the charter. At the last meeting, the mayor provided us with 3 separate pieces of paper regarding proposals to resolve issues circulating regarding what I'm going to call non-referendum bonding. I think all of us in the room are well familiar with that term. So the mayor brought this up. I think we agreed at the last meeting to discuss this
Okay.
one more time.
Well, was this discussed at the last meeting?
The proposal was discussed only really by the mayor. It wasn't
Okay.
discussed among members.
ourselves. So what is our pleasure? We want to discuss this evening?
Do I want to discuss it this evening?
How about we
Put it on the agenda.
Right. Well, we would like to kick it off. Shall we take it step by step? Section 7-3E, which seems to be the controversial piece. You want to start there, since it's the first numerical order? Has everybody read this document? Opinions, discussion? There is no discussion?
This was a proposal, well, I'll discuss it. I mean, this was a proposal by the mayor. And I think his effort was to put financing over on a section and borrowing where it would normally come from the bonding section, rather than dissipate the account that the city keeps in reserve. I think that in all of our meetings, there's been a consistent discussion about the need to cap what I'm going to call non-referendum bonding. this language is meant to provide in an emergency a means of borrowing money.
You're on 7.5 then?
I'm on 7.
Okay, then we're on 7.3. Five's
Discuss
fine. No,
7.3.
go 7.5, we're on it. I just flipped the page. Continue.
And I think that it's gonna run into the same issue in terms of getting it passed through the council and getting it approved by the voters at the next election. This is a big change.
Right now, I think we should address the pros and cons of the recommendation as opposed to what the voters may or may not do. That's pure speculation on our part, Peter. I suspect you, with your knowledge of these things, are correct. The pros and cons of this, the one thing that I had a question about is that on 3-12, I believe it is, deals with emergency ordinances, and that there is a time limit on emergency ordinances of 65 days. Excuse me, I gotta put my cheaters on, 61 days. Is that correct, Rick? And how does that impact this, or am I reading something wrong?
This is appropriation, that's an ordinance.
Ordinances follow appropriations. You can't spend it unless there's an ordinance, if I'm correct, right?
Well, ordinances may involve borrowing or funding, and they may not.
Right.
And I would say to you that 7-5 perhaps overlaps 3-12 to some extent, but they aren't entirely redundant. So, if you're talking about borrowings
Mm-hmm.
in order to meet an emergency, that will throw you into 7-5.
Okay, but could you clarify this 61-day phrase in 3-12 for me then? I'm just having a difficult time understanding that, Rick.
Well, we have never used 3-12, my memory, in 30 years. But my guess is that within the intervening 61 days, there's an expectation that you will go through the traditional required steps in order to adopt an ordinance. But this is meant as a stopgap measure.
Okay, then, under 7.5, an administration can fund emergency things. Wouldn't that require an ordinance, though?
If you're borrowing, it does, yes.
Right. What if it were to come from the unrestricted fund?
If it comes from fund balance, it does require an ordinance.
Okay.
It requires a resolution.
Is that what this is getting at, then? It would come from a...
7.5?
Right.
7.5, the language, look, if you take a look at the strikeout in 7.5,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see some language that was troublesome, at least to some people. And the troublesome language talks about the absence of sufficient general fund revenues to meet the appropriations.
Right.
Sufficient is a word that has some wiggle room in it. And while my personal opinion is that the absence of sufficient funds in the general fund to meet an appropriation doesn't necessarily mean you have to draw the general fund down to zero. The question is in doubt. Some people can read this language and say, you have to spend all of your money before you can invoke 7-5. That's, in my opinion, a crazy thing to do.
That wouldn't be wise financially.
It wouldn't
would
be
affect
wise
our bond
financially.
rating and everything else, but...
So the purpose for the language that you see is, at least in part, to clarify what I think the original intention was, to make it absolutely clear that you don't have to spend yourself down to zero,
Correct.
and that you don't have to go to a referendum in the case of a true emergency. If it was
Right.
truly an emergency, you don't have time to go to a referendum.
So then your other alternative is to finance it.
Correct.
And doesn't 3-12 talk about that?
Does 3-12 talk about financing?
I thought it
Does
did.
it talk about borrowing?
Well, I thought it referred to emergency measures. And with this, what is troubling me is this 61-day
Sure.
thing, Rick. I just flat don't understand it.
Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it, in the context of a borrowing? That's why we're thrown into 7-5.
I just find it confusing. Thank you. So this 7-5 would strictly be for emergencies. Are emergencies defined?
There's plenty of case law that will define an emergency, and it's not defined in this book now.
Well, for example, just this week, the governor declared a bridge under emergency provision to avoid some paperwork and having to go out for authorization. Said the bridge is not unsafe, it's just an expedient way to do repairs. Would this allow some aggressive mayor in the future to go out and declare emergencies if he wanted to do something that would be not really an emergency? I mean, how do you define it?
Didn't the language say, emergency threatening the lives, health, or property of citizens?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, what about the health? Can a leaky roof on a school be declared an emergency?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
that can
What
be.
would the mayor do? The mayor would go to his corporation council, seek an opinion, then go to the common council and get 2/3
All
vote.
due respect, that's speculation. We don't know what a future mayor would do. That's
Well,
what this
according to
mayor would do.
7-5 looks what he must do.
You have to.
Okay. I just find it a little cumbersome, but that's my point of view. That's all I can say. Anybody else?
I just feel a little bit constrained not being able to vote on, so that's why I feel that
No,
having a
no,
discussion is,
if the commissioners wish to vote on these, that's your pleasure. I will, well, as I'm suggesting, because the chairman is not here, that under respect for him, that we delay it. But that's my point of view. We have other people at this table that may have a different point of view. If you want to make a motion to accept or reject, feel free.
Can I go back, with your permission,
Sure.
to a question that you raised? What is an emergency? We are going to be choosing words for the next 6 months. Words have different interpretations. They have shadings. They have differences. Some are meaningful and some are not. At some point, you're going to have to rely on words to convey meaning. Emergency conveys a meaning. Can I guarantee to you that there won't be a mayor who will misuse the words that you've chosen? No, I cannot. But words are all you've got. Emergency is a word that has meaning. So if you find it vague, I challenge you to come up with a better word than emergency.
I'm not questioning your language, Rick. All as I'm saying
It's not my language.
is
Yours
it
exists
it is
anywhere.
it is up to some interpretation, as is the current charter in dealing with borrowing, which I think you will agree. It's open to interpretation. And all as I was trying to do was to clarify this. Am I in favor of a mayor having a emergency authority to fix something that is dangerous in a city? Absolutely, as I believe everybody at this table is. My reason for questioning is, can we be specific as to what is an emergency? Now, these cover, but in so voting, if you want to accept this language, there are some individuals, perhaps in the future, who could use this to their advantage of circumventing 7-10.
Yes.
All right?
We could add language. We could define emergency. But we would use the words to define it that are words that mayors will find if they go to their corporation councils or they go to a dictionary. And frankly, I'm not sure that even if you selected words to define emergency, that if we're going to imagine a mayor with ulterior motives or perhaps an excess of desire to spend city money, the mayor will find a way to get around the language that you've used to define an emergency. And then it will still be, as it is now, up to the common council to choose to vote to support it or not.
I didn't provide any words, Rick, so it's
I
not
know,
words
I
choose
can
to
bring
use.
back some words for you.
But all I'm looking at, Counselor, is something that is acceptable to the public and to the administration that allows the city to be maintained. Pure and simple, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying in so passing this, in my view, all right, this can be abused, and I think you'd have to agree.
And I'm just saying that no matter what words you use, the
I
potential
couldn't
for
agree
abuse
more.
is always going to be there.
But-
And further, what I'm trying to tell you is that emergency, this word, emergency, has special meaning. It's perhaps one of the less vague words that you're going to come across to describe this situation. It's an unforeseen event that has consequences for life, safety, and health,
Mhm.
and welfare.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Comments? Ed?
On
Mayor?
any of the three sections, or is this one section?
If we can wrap up, are we through with 7.5? We'll go. Or unless you want to propose a motion on this, or do you want to deal with the whole package? Thoughts? Paul?
7 dash, actually, on one issue. I don't think we need to take all three as a whole. I think they
I don't
can be
think we do.
separated in terms of
Absolutely.
voting, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Although they were presented, introduced to us together as part of a program, and the Section 7-5 emergency appropriations, as I understand it, in an emergency, which I think is clearly defined, the council and the mayor together can vote to appropriate as may be necessary. And then the question became, what happens if there was not money in the budget to appropriate? Then what are they going to do? And the crossed out language was the direction that both the mayor and the council had. I think it makes it clear. I think the change makes it clear as to what the council can do and gives them a basis or a foundation upon which to act. Otherwise, in the absence of sufficient general funds, what does that mean? I mean, we can come up with 10 people come up with 10 different answers. I think this makes what happens in that situation absolutely clear, and I don't have any problems with what is an emergency or whether there's going to be an abuse of that condition. I don't see that as being an issue. I don't see it as ever been an issue in the past, nor at the risk of speculating, it seems, in the future.
Okay.
So I have no problem with voting on this separately. Matter of fact, I'll make a motion that we approve.
Before you do, if I may, just one point, Paul, there are no limitations that fall under this emergency provision.
I understand that.
It could be any dollar amount.
I make a motion that we approve the recommendation as proposed in the handout that we received entitled Emergency Appropriations.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
And seconded, that we accept the recommendation, the mayor's recommendation to change section 7-5. Those in favor of the amendment
Mr. Chairman, do we have some further discussion on that?
I was gonna say, I can open the discussion, say,
Don't we vote to accept it and then hold a discussion?
No,
No?
discussion first.
Help me out, folks. I'm new at this.
Motion, second, and then
Okay,
discuss.
thank you. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think your concern on this is, and I don't mean to read your mind, is that there obviously is no limitation in terms of what could be, what any amount and what could be spent this way.
That's correct.
And I know that you're concerned with that. The fact that it applies to emergencies and it applies to a part of our charter that I think has rarely been used means it's something that hasn't really been well thought out. And it means it's something that I don't know how we can put necessarily a number on it. We could put a high number on it and probably be safe if we were going to put a cap on it. Or we could look to other numbers that we have used in section 7-10. But I can understand that, and we should talk about that.
I agree. Because this supersedes 710, if we
Yes, it
accept
does.
710. Thoughts?
You don't want to,
Pardon me?
you don't want to know.
Sure I want to know.
You're worried about a dollar amount, but in that, the revised version, it says financing to meet said appropriation shall be provided in such a manner. Shouldn't that give us the reference that it's to meet the need? Why would you, I mean, if it's an emergency, I think you have an option to set an amount. I mean, if the bridge collapsed or whatever, and you need to repair the bridge, I mean, how could you put an amount in an emergency, I guess is what I'm trying to
Mhm.
conceive. Would you do that? How could you do it?
There's ways of doing projects that you can do the emergency aspect of it and then go in for funding for other parts. But that's process. I don't want to talk about process. I want to talk about the concept of accepting this provision, which does not limit any administration in terms of its ability to go out and raise money under bonding or any other form with no limits under an emergency provision.
But then-
That's what this does.
Yes.
If you're comfortable with that, then.
But it's talking about an emergency situation. And at some point, you've got to understand that we have elected these people because we trust that they're going to do the right thing
Mhm.
and not run away with all sorts of money.
Okay.
And I think what this section does is clarify. It doesn't change much except clarify what is currently in the charter.
No, it changes it. I think
How?
it changed. This supersedes 7-10, the $2.5 million.
No, what I'm talking about is 7-5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The language that struck out really said the same thing, just in a
In a-
more vague way.
Right.
So it's just clarifying it, it's not really changing it. Because we always did have in the absence of sufficient general funds, additional means of financing shall be provided in a manner consistent with the provisions of general statute. So we always had the ability to do it in an emergency, and this just clarifies how
Okay.
we do it.
How they do it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do you want to vote on this now?
What was the
Well, we
motion?
have to, there's a motion
You
on
have
the
to
floor.
vote now,
What
yeah.
I'm saying, is discussion finished?
Right.
Okay, let's vote. Those in favor of accepting the recommendation for change to 7-5, so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Seven dash, where do you want to go next? 7-3?
17A would be easier, once you get out of the way.
Well, I think, yeah, it would be, but I think that 7-10 also refers back to 7-3, if I'm not mistaken. Discussion?
I'd like to start the discussion.
Go ahead.
One of the things that, the issues that came up that the chairman asked me to research was Councilman Levy had made a proposal regarding the capital budget and about the dates of submission. And I didn't fully understand his concept, but it piqued my interest, and so I asked that I meet with Councilman Levy, and I did. And what came from it was a discussion that involved, I think, the remaining two sections, and an idea, a very simple idea that he's proposed, and it's kind of won me over, and it's the idea that's won me over. It really has. I'm going to pass out what I would propose to be an alternative change to 7-3, just for purposes of discussion at this point, but I also think I want to get it into everyone's hands.
May I ask a question, Paul? Is this something that you prepared?
No, I'll explain. What's being passed out is a portion, there's extras too. A portion of the charter, which is 7-3, which Councilman Levy had reproduced, and I think these have been passed out before to the commission. And you've probably seen this before. And I'll try to make this as brief as possible, although it lends itself to a bit of education, at least it did for me. The operating budget, the Board of Education budget, what I'll call the operating budget, and the capital improvement budget. One of the reasons that we're talking about bonding is the capital budget and its lack of attention more than anything. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you've talked about that at length. And Councilman Levy has looked at this from a very simple point of view. The Board of Education presents its budget on February 15th. The council has presented the budget, the operating budget, on April 7th. The capital improvement budget comes out of the Planning Commission, and there's the date that, and help me, council, if I get this wrong, the council gets that at the same time it gets the operating budget. Correct. And so there's no separate consideration. And more often than not, and I'm not talking about any single mayor, but in the past, administrations have used this more as a political tool. When I say this, I mean the capital budget as a political tool. So that it's a place to send projects to die, but yet you can go back to your constituents and say, you know, I put it on the capital budget, and it's there, and I've tried, and that's where it is, and it'll be considered. To the extent that the capital budget has been ignored, the simple change to 7-3 would be under E, if you look down, and no other changes to 3, would allow the Common Council and the mayor to address the capital improvement budget as it should be. As part, I know there was Mrs. Mitchell has talked about Colorado where they have a commission of civilians that get together and department heads and they all talk through. What Councilman Levy is proposing is that the mayor presents to the Common Council the capital improvement budget early on February 15th. That gives the council, the mayor, the planning commission, everyone the ability in terms of time to consider that budget in and of itself so that the proper attention can be given to that budget without the chaos of an overall operating budget. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons that the Board of Education budget was proposed early, so that not only that the mayor can look at it, that the council can look at it, but the public also gives the public some time to take a look at it. And so what the proposal is in 7-3E is that it be presented, the capital improvement program, I think it's called, be presented to the Common Council for adoption, additions, deletions no later than February 15th. what does this do? It allows everyone to then look at the capital improvement budget at a time when, before it can be politicized, maybe, before someone can take and use it as they see fit. It gives it a time, it gives a spotlight to what needs to be done and not done, instead of it being the stepsister to the operating budget. And I think it's a very simple change. It's right on point. I think it moves the spotlight, it separates the spotlight so that capital improvement budget can be considered, so can the operating budget. And for me, it gave me the idea that, maybe we don't have to worry as much about a cap. Maybe we don't have to worry because we're putting more, we don't know for the capital budget, nobody's really sat down and looked at it. Since it's always been combined with the operating budget, I'm not as worried about either putting a cap in or leaving it off. It takes the focus away from trying to solve the problem with a Band-Aid of a cap or no cap. Is it 2.5 million? Is it 500,000? Is it 10%? Come up with these complex ideas and moves. Let's just consider the budget in and of itself. I don't think that's ever been done. So for me, that's a long-winded way of saying that I like this change better than any of the changes that I've seen, at least in what Mayor Boughton proposed. So I think that just got much too complex. And as much as I am a voice of flexibility, I want to empower these folks and give them the flexibility to get this job done. And this only helps them do their job better. So I think we've already voted on the cap, and we don't need to go back. But I think this then completes the puzzle. This completes the circle. This allows Common Council and the mayor and the citizens the ability to look at the capital improvement budget as it should be by itself, at least for a period of time.
Well summarized, Paul. You hit the nail right on the head. I think that's one of the major issues with the capital budget. And it may be a surprise to you, but most corporations that I'm aware of follow that exact process. The capital budgets precede operating budgets simply because there are a lot of expenses that are contained in a capital budget that have to be included in the operating budget. So that would work well. I think the lead time does exactly what you said, in that it gives more attention to a capital program in front of both the administration as well as the common council. I think it's a great idea. But are you suggesting that wording in replace of what the mayor's doing here with this 10%?
Yeah, basically I would suggest that you're right.
The process you're talking about.
Exactly. I don't see any need for considering the documents entitled borrowing or capital improvements to be addressed. We've already voted on the borrowing aspect of it. That combined with this, I think completes the circle. It gives the flexibility. I think history has demonstrated that the administrations in the past have addressed borrowing in a very judicious manner, and I think they'll continue. And I think to the extent that our citizens have any problems, they have their wards, their elected officials from their wards to talk to. And to the extent that there's not enough backbone there to, quote, stand up to the mayor, maybe I'm naive by thinking otherwise, but guess what? I mean, the charter replaced that type of human input. I think that's got to come from the individuals who've been elected or elected different ones. We got to give them the flexibility to run this city, and I think this does both.
Other thoughts?
I don't know, I kind of like the idea of having the mayor and the public works director create a list of high priority items, which, capital improvements right now kind of just sits there. And I would like to see them prioritize items, so
While they do that now, I think there could be an improvement, and kind of dovetails with Paul's recommendation.
I agree with Paul that county council needs more time than what they're given now, and I think we should put in a longer time frame.
So we're
in
thinking
there.
about changing the process, the capital budgeting process. Mary, did you have a thought?
So, it's confused.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So instead of all of this language, just this what's underlined here.
Well, what I think would be
I'd like to
appropriate
see
is
some of
Well,
both.
some sort of a
Yeah.
write-up
The only
coming out
proposed
of
change
this
then
law.
is
The only,
Instead of this on both these pages, right? We're talking about both of these together, correct?
yes,
Okay.
the ones that entitled capital improvement and borrowing,
Okay. Just add this.
Correct.
7.3E.
because we've already voted
Right.
on the other piece.
But I think
And
there's
that's the circle that I
also,
was-
there's also processes that Joan is talking about. You know, might it be a good idea, Paul, since you spearheaded this, is to get together with a few folks and come up with the language that would address the process needs as well as the timing needs? Would that be something that would be logical?
I'm very reticent to go any further, because I'm not a big micromanager. I don't think this document.
I don't think you're micromanaging, Paul. I think what we're trying to do is provide a framework for capital planning, which I think if you read now and look at the process, I suggest that it probably would be helpful to have that outline.
If it's this commission's will, I will be glad to.
Is it your will, sir?
I can only be challenged by motion. I'm more than willing to do it, but I think at this point, it's gotta be the will of this commission for me. Because my proposal is as it sits.
Well, I
With-
don't feel an urgency
Commissioner Reed.
myself to vote on these, recommendations tonight. Maybe other people do. I think it would be better to take some time and get it right, is all I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
I have to remind you though that we are on schedule and we were reminded at the last meeting that we are behind schedule.
Well,
We should move
I
forward.
appreciate that concern, but, there's a lot of weeks between now and when do we have to submit the report to
Draft
the
report by end of
the end of this year to the Common Council? Now, we get feedback from the Common Council, right? We get feedback from the Common Council if they want to either accept or change.
or by recommendation.
So that's not built into the 16-month timetable. The public hearing comes before or after the final submission.
You must have a public hearing after preparing, but before submitting the draft report.
Okay, so we could have that report, or that meeting in December. To look at the changes that we've made thus far, when this is drafted, and I'm sorry I wasn't here last week, so thank you for bringing this up. Who will be writing the changes, Rick? Will that be you, or will it be the commissioners?
I don't know. That's something that you're going to have to decide. I was wondering myself how this would come out. My first thought was that I would write it and you would approve it. But frankly, I've been preparing the amendments as we've gone along.
Correct.
So I think any one of you will be in a position when that time comes to write.
Or in what cooperation of you we could do
You know,
it? It's really the chairman's call.
the
What he
commission
should
will
do.
vote
Okay.
on how this goes, and I would not presume to guess what your decision.
That's probably a fair statement. Thank you, sir. I feel if you look at the important issues that we have to tackle, Mary, that this is one of the important ones. We have spent hours on this. I think it's imperative that we get it right. That's from my perspective. So, Paul, if you want to take this on to come up with, maybe you and Joan get together to work on some process then?
The problem is, I think something else should be in there from here, and he doesn't think anything should be in there.
Where do you want to go from here?
So-
What do you think should be in there?
Uh,
How would we change? And again,
The whole
it's a
thing.
conceptual thing, it's not.
I'm not sure how it would change the whole thing. I would definitely insert the time frame into this.
Into the document called capital improvement.
Right, I'd insert, present a program and the language, to the common council for adoption, additions or deletions no later than, the February 15th date, that's the same, that's when the Board of Ed is due. I think it probably could be around the same date.
Was the rationale or some kind of criteria for the April date?
It's just, I think in the charter, it contains all the budgets for the city is, that to be submitted to the common council at once, and that's the school budget, the capital budget, and the operating budget. I think that's the requirement of the charter.
I think that's what the fiscal year
What we're
goes into
talking
July,
about
right?
now is changing that.
Right, I agree, you should move it, but I also agree that we should do, I was just thinking before we did any of that, was there any other rationale behind the April date?
I think that there is state statute backing that up, right, correct? The submission to the budget.
Not that I
budget.
recall seeing.
Isn't there a state statute that says that the city must adopt a budget by May 14th or something like that?
Not that I recall seeing, but I haven't looked. I've always been guided by this document. I don't know, if you're asking whether or not we can tinker with the April 7th date,
That's basically.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Certainly, you're not gonna find a state statute that prevents you from moving it earlier. The question is, is there some kind of drop dead date that's after April 7th? I don't know the answer to that question.
So we could move the capital budget earlier and still retain the April 7th date.
Does anybody have any other questions about this, the estimated cost of the projects? I think what he's talking about here is the priority list. The priority list can't be more than 10% of the entire capital budget. I think that's what he meant when this was put together, yes. Okay.
Which means he could go out, the wording on this, Rick, refers to the current year and the 5 out years. If the combined capital budget over the 5-year strategic plan, if you will, pick a number, happen to be $500 million, does that say he could spend $50 million in the current year? Or would it only be 10% of the current year priority?
It's a good question, it's not clear.
No, it's not.
Because when you read that, it almost begs the question as to what the
It
amount
would
is.
have to be more specific on
Should
whether
be.
it was that year's.
All I can tell you is that the conversation I had with the mayor, his goal was to try and create some language that would give a mayor and council the ability to borrow for high priority items without having to fall under the cap. Remember where we are is we have 2.5, but no annual cap. And he was appreciating the fact that there is pressure from the public to create an annual cap. And his answer to that was, that's fine, you can have an annual cap, provided that we have some mechanism for dealing with these high priority items. I don't think he cares if you modify this language to make it crystal clear in your mind about whether it's 10% or 2% or 1%, but I think that's his concern. What you do with that,
Mhm.
your conversation.
Can I just make a comment on that whole whole concept of this, I think even if it is a high priority project, it should go to referendum if it's above a certain, because we're spending a lot of money, and I think this whole concept in seven dash 3E is not the way that I think that it should go. 'Cause I think that if it is a high ticket item project, it should go to a referendum.
You're right. As I read this, correct me if I'm wrong, as this stands, if we adopted this, some mayor in the future could conceivably go out and build a new police station for $50 million and not have to go to referendum. Is that correct?
I believe it's correct. I'm not sure that that.
I think that's the concern. I think that's the concern. If somehow we could, to your point, alter the language that specifies of the current year, the other thing would be of priority items. Who determines which projects are priority? Is that the common council or is that
No,
the mayor?
it says it.
The mayor and the director of public works create a list, and that list has to be approved by 2/3 of the planning commission. That's how it gets created.
So the priorities meet different review steps as it goes on.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think the ambiguity arises because of the two periods, this fiscal year and 5 fiscal years.
Which is usually
And
the
that was
capital
just
plan.
picked up without much thought, perhaps without enough thought on my part, from the preceding session.
Well, the 5-year capital plan is, that's appropriate. I think what is important is the current fiscal year, the amount of money that you're going to request funding for in that particular year. And I think, from my perspective, having looked at the capital program, I was concerned that a lot of the priority items were being pushed out to the out years. And they were bound by this magical $500,000 number, which, obviously would get us into trouble. So,
I think I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
What I heard from the mayor last meeting was that it was his expectation that if the renovation or the new police building came up, that was the kind of project that would go referendum. And so I'm answering you that yes, under this language, it looks as though because we have this enormous capital list of capital programs that maybe the math says that the new police building falls under that formula. But it certainly wasn't his intention. So, if there's some way that you can come up with some language that still yields high priority items, but doesn't capture as many or as big a number, then I think that satisfies the mayor. It speaks to his concern without giving away the store, if you will.
And I guess I feel that if it's high priority in the sense of an emergency, we have that covered in the other section. And if it's high priority in the sense of a project that we want to get done, then why not go to the public and see if they want to get it done, through a referendum?
Certainly, as we amended 7-10, it will have to go to referendum on a big project,
But,
above 2.5 million.
no, but Paul, again, I think this, if we accepted this wording in 7.3 now, that would supersede 7.3.
Oh, I understand that. I'm saying we don't need that language. I don't see a need for it. I think we've already dealt with it. Now, if we want to put an annual cap, that's a different question, I think. But
Well, you bring
why are we forcing, I don't see where we need, we can ask the mayor and the director of public works to come up with a list of high priority items, maybe so that the citizens will know, or maybe to go to county council, but
in effect, it does give you a trigger point. As Rick is saying, if you take the current fiscal year and take the recommended percentage that 10% of the projects could float, they could very well cap out annual spending without recommending a referendum to a smaller number than what 710 would provide under the current wording. Example, 10%. If the capital budget was $50 million, that would allow him to spend $5 million. Under 710, he could spend any amount he wants, as long as the project doesn't go over $2.5 million. A little confusing.
That's what, well, it's what Diane, I think I'm speaking to Diane's point, that something like, you know, big projects should go to a referendum, and I think they will. As the way 710 has currently been amended by our vote. You know, I think that's true.
That's
I
right.
hate to create for the mayor and for the director of public works. I don't want to force them into a situation where either spending or not spending. I don't see the need for any of that in this document. Let them decide what the process is.
I think how this came about, 7.3E came about because the mayor tried to put an annual cap in 710. So then he came up with this as a way of putting in and out in case something came up that really needed to be done, and we were over 2.5 mil for the year. Our current vote stands with no yearly cap, so he could just go ahead and do it.
Well, no, if he wants to propose a budget over, project over 2.5 million,
Well,
then he has to go to referendum.
I don't think the
no,
wording
that's
under
not
the
what our
wording of
current
this
vote is.
would not do it.
That's what this one says.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. He's talking about 8 projects.
Oh, okay, a project.
Yeah. So that he would have to address. No, I don't know, I don't see the.
You're talking about
I'm not
a
saying I don't see it,
project,
I do
but
see it, but I think everything's in place.
Well, the way I read this, Paul, is that he could take 10% of the current, if we choose to use that phrase, current fiscal year, 10% of those priorities, and submit a project in excess of 2.5 million without going to referendum.
With his president, yes.
Right?
Yes.
With the amended language.
With his proposed language,
His
that's
proposed
right.
language.
Yes.
I agree.
So,
And I don't see the need to make that change.
so with current language, what we passed would be that as long as projects remain at 2.5 million or under, he could bond those. If it exceeds the $2.5 million figure, then and only then, per project, would he have to go to referendum. That's what we have.
and we're saying per project. Now, what he did this for was because there were so many people who wanted a
He wanted a
2.5 cap,
trigger.
period.
Correct, John.
On
He wants a
all
trigger point.
projects.
That's what he's, in, the bottom line is, the mayor is recommending a trigger point to go to referendum. Am I right?
Be different for. We already have
Right.
one.
Mhm.
Well, the trigger point per project, what he is looking for is an annual trigger point, if you will, Paul, of some dollar amount.
Mm.
Okay, that would prevent a future administration from going out and conceivably building a new building and not having to go to referendum. I don't, it's not likely to occur, but you just have to recognize the ability to get there with this kind of language exists. And if this is not comfortable language, then I think we need to work on language as well. The idea, I think, is a sound idea, what the mayor is proposing, to try to put a trigger point over what we have done, but to provide him flexibility in future administrations, the flexibility to maintain the assets of the city. And that's what I think we're all going to do. It only comes down to at what dollar amount. Thoughts over there, Peter? You look like you're in deep
You
thought.
know, I just don't, that, you've seen the capital budget, and because you've seen it, you shared it with me a little bit, and I looked at it, and that's just a number that's just not a real number in a sense, in terms of, there's a lot of things on there that are just there, I don't know where they came from or emanated. So, you know, we're back to the trigger number idea on how to figure this out, and your original proposal is just as much merit as your personal proposal as this does in that respect. I think this, we're tending down to make this more complicated than we need to do. I like the proposal of making a separate day to present a capital budget to the city council. Of course, as everyone to look at it and prepare, it's out there. I think when something's disseminated to the council, it's another way of saying it has to be made public to everybody. And that gives the public a chance, if they're interested, to find out about it and have a little bit of input. I'm reluctant to really get involved with the mayor's proposal for 7.3. I'm sort of happy with we passed the emergency section. That's a lot of leeway. We can all think of potentials where somebody could drive a truck through it. I'm comfortable with it in terms of the language of emergency. I like what we've done to 7.10, and I think we can pretty much be done. If we adopt the language Paul proposed, to 7.3.
So your suggestion is to just accelerate the date.
The date.
It's due to, what about the process that Joan is referring to?
The process
changes.
The process changes that they have the city, the political leaders of our city are going to have to submit a capital budget on a date there by itself. You know, it's not hidden with the regular budget. So they're going to have to come and present that. And they're going to figure out that process, not us.
That's fair. Any other discussion?
So can you just clarify this next?
We'll
Then
try.
are we gonna eliminate 7-3 altogether? We're not gonna discuss it?
No, it's in there, though, right?
Discussion right
Sorry.
now is, there's a feeling that what Peter is saying, and in fact, Peter and Paul, I haven't
James in there now.
Peter and Paul.
Yeah, James.
Bring the candy bars with you the next time, would you?
Paul just confused the whole thing. If you get James, maybe we can lose.
Well, I think the suggestion coming out by Paul makes a lot of sense in terms of accelerating the capital budget process. From that flows perhaps a better process, because more people will be involved in it, having more time to fly under the microscope of the Common Council. It will get more attention, which is, I think, one of the objections that we had in the past, that it was not getting sufficient review. That said, along with the emergency provision, would feel there's no need to make any other changes to 7.3, which provides for a, quote, form of a trigger point to go to referendum. So the referendum trigger point would be any project over $2.5 million that does not fall under the emergency provision. Now, is that,
I understand. I don't.
God, I didn't realize I said that.
Don't try to repeat. So then from that, then, you're telling us that the emergency case, the other part, there should be need then for this part where.
That's the discussion. I'm not telling you there isn't. I'm saying the opinion between Peter and Paul is that by accelerating the process and combining that with the emergency provisions, they feel there is no need for this.
Then there's no need for, if you do all that, there's no need for a list of priority.
Well, that would fall in part of the process of the capital budgeting process, which is separate from the funding process. Yes, there is a need to identify priorities in the capital budget. If you look at almost any capital budget of any corporation, there are classifications, priorities, and impact statements with each project, which I think would be very helpful as we go through this. But,
with the more high priority ones, sooner.
One would think that would be the case, correct?
So I think that if we leave the language the way it is, the process will make them prioritize.
Well, the only change that I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're recommending is this change on accelerating the submission of the capital plan to the common council, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly, because I think that will force the mayor, the planning commission, everyone involved in the capital improvement program to, it in and of itself is gonna be prioritized, it's gonna have to be. Partly to the language that Diane talked about, but in and of itself, it's gonna be prioritized. And it's gonna bring some attention to it. And let those who run the city decide what kind of attention is going to be brought to it. I wanna limit the amount of politicization. I don't want politics as much to play with this budget, and I think that's what it will do. It keeps it simple. There's still a trigger point of 2.5 million. Otherwise, what we're doing is complicating things much too complex. I don't think we need that. I think we need the priorities, and we need to focus on the capital budget at the time it deserves it. And by moving it up, I think it does that. To ask them to go any further, I think that's up to them to decide. That's why we're there. That's why they've been elected. That's why they get the big bucks. It's up to them. And I don't think this document should set forth anything more than that. Give them their ability, give them the powers, and make sure it's reasonably given out. And I think that's what this does, certainly with the changes to the purchasing provisions. And I think it's a complete circle, and it works well in a very simple form. Citizens, when you want to either attack or become part of it, it's very easy to get involved with. It's easy to...
What is your desire? Do you want to pursue this via a vote tonight, or do you want time to digest this information and take it over and put it on the agenda for next month?
I think we should draft a 7-3E section with just moving up the time period without getting the proposals that the mayor has recommended and vote on at future meeting.
You have it in your hands tonight.
That's what it is.
What Councilman Lee put together,
That's this?
that's exactly
It's
right.
this.
If you-
Just that paragraph E. and
That's the only change, that's the only change. That phrase, I'm looking now at the top of the page is Chapter 7, Finance and Taxation. And I'm moving down to Section 7-3, Duties of the Mayor on the Budget. And I look at subsection E. As part of the budget, the mayor shall present a program, and then this is the change, to the common council for adoption, additions or deletions, no later than February 15th, that has been, and it ends there. Those are the words of change. Everything else remains the same.
Not to nitpick on this, Paul, but I think as part of the budget refers to the annual budget that was submitted to the common council. So some language change would have to take place. This is not part of the budget. What would be the capital plan would precede the operating budget of the city, and then, once it's passed, be folded into the operating budget. So in effect, it would come before the common council early for its pre-approval, if you will, and then, after the changes are made, would be folded into the operating budget. So I think it would be a two-step project, which again is not unusual.
I'm not saying this. I think it's part of the budget.
You want the whole budget.
It is part of the budget.
It
You want
is.
the whole budget in by the 15th of February.
No. As part of the budget,
Well,
then the capital improvement program. Just part of the budget, that's all. And all I'm doing is saying, instead of giving it to you on April 7th, that part of the budget is gonna come in February 15th. That's all. That is it. It's very simple.
I think that's the way it should be.
Which way?
That's
Only
all it
as-
is right now.
As part of the overall budget, the capital budget would be due in February.
As soon as you put February 15th in there,
7-3 subsection E by adding the language after the word program or before the word previously. The words to the common council for adoption. Look, additions or deletions no later than February 15th. That has been.
Seconded? Seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, it passes.
Scrubbing back to the 27th.
But were we changing the 2 and the 5? Is that just going to be typo?
It was a typo.
Customize the process of running between 2 and 5.
Moving along rapidly.
You know what? I don't care. I'm not talking about it again.
Let's talk about borrowing. The changes in here, do we have to refer to 7-3E? I don't think so. This is in 7-10-12. So subject to the provisions of section 7.5 and 7-3-E. Is that, excuse me, do I have the right one? Yes, 7.5 doesn't need to be there, excuse me. 7E is emergency. 7.5, we don't have to put 7.5 in this, right? Just 7.3E,
No,
which is the emergency provision.
no, 7.5 would be nice, 7.3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got it. So subsection 7.3E we can scratch out. Okay, folks. Now, the $64,000 question is, any fiscal year is what the mayor is recommending. And we have debated this one back and forth a number of times. There seems, go ahead, thank you.
I don't know what the mayor but I sense that when he proposed this change to 7-10, it was with the assumption that we would agree
Some wiggle
to the
room.
others.
Some wiggle room.
So I'm not sure that if you told me we were going to go along with 7E, I'm not sure you would be as enthusiastic about 7-10.
You mean the recommended change? Is that right?
Correct.
Should we ask him?
Oh, we know that he won't.
How do you know? I'm not a mind reader.
No, because he did this. He said that perfectly clearly when he was here. He inserted the cap for a fiscal year along with the other changes that he recommended. If we put the cap in here to allow some room elsewhere for emergency situations, et cetera.
Well, he still has that. He still has that provision in emergency passed out. So those things, the only other thing is that it does not provide room above the priority items.
Mhm.
Where do we want to go?
Peter wants to stay with what we already voted on.
That's right. I think we're done with those.
Somebody wants to make a motion.
Discussion? How do you feel about it? What we have, the only thing that we need to change is adding wording about the section 7-5 to what we've already passed. Correct? We've already passed the 2.5.
Right. Do you need a reference to 7.5 in there?
That's refers to 710. Yeah, the last line is pursuant to either sections 3-11 or 710.
Well, I think the correct interpretation of the charter, language in 710, as things stand now, I would argue that the correct interpretation is that 7-10 provides general power, and that the emergency power is a narrower, more specific provision. The specific governs over the general. That's the general rule of statutory construction. The specific language does reference 7-10. So I think that the correct interpretation is that if you're in an emergency, you look to 7-5. 7-5 says you have to go through referendum provision. So I think as things stand now, it's clear without language in 710 refers back to 7-5.
So no other action is required by this correct versus what we previously passed.
Unless you want to, but as things stand now, it's clear.
What is the commissioner's pleasure? We don't have to vote.
Right.
We're satisfied with things as they are. Ed? Okay, we're all satisfied with the $2.5 million project basis, which is what's being recommended as, correct? I vote against it.
You can't.
I just think there needs to be some trigger point, because one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this preamble is that, what, would you read that statement? We'll read it in due time. Okay, moving on. Thank you, folks. Thank you for bearing with me. Item 3, change to 6-9. Peter, can you help me with this? Is this are we supposed to talk to the police commissioner or something about this?
It was added to the agenda by Carla at the last meeting. We were supposed to, I think somewhere we heard from the chief of police on this at one point. We might be referring to.
I think initially there was part of the mayor's letter to us that the police chief wanted to, I thought there was 2 changes he wanted to make. One was change in statutory language or something to update it, is that right, Rick? And the other one is 6-9, he wanted to eliminate the special force? Peter, have you seen this letter? That's the first time I saw it.
And perhaps maybe we should just flip this item to the next agenda. I'll disseminate the whole
Thank you.
I thought everybody got this.
No. All in favor of doing that, let's just do it. Okay, we're gonna move item 3 to the next meeting. Discussion of adding charter section requirement, periodic, okay, this is not covered in the current charter, as I recall, is it?
That's correct.
Is there a state statute about, this is item 4, Rick. Is there a state statute that requires a charter commission anytime, or is that just, there isn't? And there's nothing prohibiting, if we want to make it whatever term we want.
There's language in says there's 25 or something that says that while a charter revision commission is pending deliberation, that's the only proposal.
that would have a kind of an interim look, like on a 5-year period, where changes that would come down as a result of state statutes and changes in departments or stuff like that. Since this thing's got to be a little bit of a living, breathing document, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be appropriate to have, like a short-term 5-year review, and then a longer, more extensive review at the end of every decade, or 10 years before. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I don't recall seeing that in any of the charters. There was a mandatory 10-year review in about 20% of the charters. Otherwise, when it's something that's a problem, then you call it a commission.
We can handle that by saying at least every 10 years. Or at least we'll take care of it. See, Peter, you are training me to be an attorney. What should we do, folks? Do we want to draft language, or do we want to put something in the charter regarding?
Rick, is the current language in 8-11 amendment of charter? This charter may be amended in a manner prescribed by law. Is that what gives us the authority? Now? No?
Well, state statute. If 8-11 didn't exist, state law.
It still gives us. So this is as close to what we have this ordinance now. So there's no reason for,
For 8-11.
yeah.
Doesn't add anything.
So
Drop it.
drop it as an issue. It's easy to drop it, it's been dropped too often. I mean, the Charter Revision Commission, for the last few, really never accomplished their efforts, never brought fruition. The question is it a good idea just to have it automatically, and at least forces the council and the mayor to have some other body draft something at any given time, whether they want to or not. I have no position on it. I thought about it, I think about it 2 different ways, and argued it both ways. There's a part of it that makes sense, and the other part is it is a cumbersome part of the process. And it's not going to pass anyway if the council doesn't want it.
Well, I think we need to say section
sufficient to do what we want to do.
Well, I'm pretty clear about what the concept is. If the commission wants,
You hear a motion? There it is. Second? Those in favor of adding an amendment, adding under H-11, the words that a charter revision commission will be appointed at least every 10 years. Thank you. Should be reviewed, thank you. At least every 10 years.
So,
Discussion.
I'm sorry, when you say review, that's pretty vague. The charter should either be the charter revision commission or anybody can review the
You and I
charter.
and
Appointed.
I may have mistyped.
Get rid of
We
your
got a
motion.
vote on the
Then withdraw your motion.
Is withdraw my,
Withdraw the motion.
did you withdraw the motion?
No.
The motion?
Emotion.
Right.
Then you have to withdraw the motion that you made.
Motion withdrawn.
So we will entertain one.
You have to entertain language. Take that motion back.
Yes.
Go ahead, and the second version will also withdraw the second. We all nod that this is something.
That's it.
Thank you.
Please, Fred.
Do it.
And make it short.
And I'm putting a note here, short,
Very.
That was everything.
very short.
Discussion of preamble.
We had jury duty. There had to be something like jury duty. Once we served, we didn't have to come back.
Wasted 2 decades.
Has to be like a jury duty.
You become chairman next time, chairperson.
I'm out. It's like jury duty. Once you're on, that's it. You can't go back.
But jury duty's every 7 years. Just think about all the experience you have. It'd be well suited. Next item is the discussion of preamble. Did you have something that you wanted to hand out?
She did.
You did.
I wasn't here.
There was the first one in May. Everybody got the first one, correct?
Correct. You have next one there.
Yes.
What's the final version we have?
I don't know. I had a draft.
This
Something
same one that I
emailed to me
have.
from our
Yes.
chairman. Draft change.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I had a chance to review
That's
this.
the motion.
And I'd like to make a motion to adopt the preamble as drafted.
Second.
Just
Give us
make-
the opportunity to read.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Thank you, Jeff, Peter, and Paul.
Are we checking the grammar?
Not Mary's. She's
I
got-
wouldn't.
Well, You're talking yourself into a job.
The only question, if I can have one question, in strong political leadership, it doesn't specify a who.
I
Who
never,
provides the strong political leadership?
From everybody.
About a mayor, isn't that intended?
Taking off the comma, I like it's just I really do.
You're taking
I
out the
trust-
comma after Fairfield?
After comments, doctors, please, will take it.
we'll move into common.
Could I point out to this distinguished commission one phrase in here? The right of every citizen to be part of the decision-making process.
You get to vote.
What about bonding?
You get to
What about
go to
referendum?
referendums on bonding too.
You want to switch citizen to elected?
No, I'm just
No.
saying, I'm being, a little facetious here. We're saying one thing and we're behaving in a different way, so.
I think there's a number of decisions that are made by our elected officials, which you and I will never vote on. And one of them is going to be bonded. It's going to be, that's not just the yes, it's going to be.
I guess the only thing don't feel comfortable with, Paul, other discussion? We have,
I move to amend my motion to reflect the deletion of a comma after the word Fairfield or in the first line, and the insertion
I
of.
don't think you need to do that in your motion.
I think the language just to be cleaned up. You just clean up the language, clean up the, okay? The principal has passed the document. Is there any other discussion? Ed? Let's try your mind. All those in favor of accepting this as a preamble to the charter signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. It's accepted as is with the corrections.
Well done for you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mary, will you be adjusting the time? You will? Because I've read these and these, and it makes a difference.
The last item on the agenda is discussion of topics to be resolved, and frankly, I'm a little confused because some of my feedback was that this was done at the last meeting. Is that correct?
It was not.
That's this. Okay. I think we can go through this pretty quick. The city clerk is still outstanding, and that's a TBD. The treasurer's been resolved, right? Planning and zoning has been resolved, correct?
Correct.
Municipal elections have been resolved, correct? The organizational review, have you had a discussion on that?
I think that there's been some brief discussion that we really don't have time to do a thorough organizational review of the functions of each department. Just maybe a cursory review of changing department titles and stuff, maybe we'll have time to do, but not to really go into the organization of every department.
To share with the commissioners, there have been discussions in the executive committee at one time, early when we got started. And there was a couple of different alternatives we could pursue. From what I understand, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the mayor's charge to us was to take a look at, literally a thorough look at the departments. And I think among the executive committee, we felt that we were not qualified to do that. That if such a task was to be done, that should be done by a professional organization that has that as their skill. We would certainly entertain any recommendations by the individual departments or by the mayor in which to change the charter, and that would include titles and other things. So I think an in-depth review is not something that we should do. From my point of view and from an expertise point of view.
There was a concept that was briefly discussed also, that all the detail on the different structures of the departments maybe be deleted if it's not required by state statute, which list the department so that it can be handled at a different level rather than being a charter issue.
Absolutely, that's a good point. The descriptions in the charter currently is almost like a job description in some cases. And that too had been discussed as a possibility of taking and just putting in broad responsibilities in the charter, and then having job descriptions and qualifications as part of a overall job description on file, approved by the mayor and by the common council, and have it on file in the personnel director's office. That's something that, if we choose to do, we could do that, but recognize this is going to take a great deal of work to do it. I think it's worthwhile doing it because I think if the charter changes every 10 years, job responsibilities and everything are more fluid than that. They change more often. So we could go through this and do those changes, but it would probably require more frequent meetings.
And by the changes, you mean just to delete stuff? We have to.
We could condense the job description. But as we tried to do that one time, yours truly, for example, changing the civil preparedness office, I was saying it's a $10,000 budget, why do we need it? And I was well on the way to making a motion to eliminate the department, and somebody, correctly so, said, you do that, and we're gonna be not able to get grants. So we've got to be careful what we do. We've got to take the time to do it, thoroughly if we wish to tackle that. So,
It seems to me that we're not gonna have enough time to do that level of review.
Peter?
This is back up for us to discuss tonight, but for us to pick when we want to talk about these issues going forward, in terms of what dates we can do this, these items. So,
What dates or whether we're going to do it.
and that as well.
So what's your pleasure? Do you want to put this on an agenda for a future meeting?
Well, I don't want to put all of them on the agenda.
No,
but
but I'm
if-
talking
if
about
we wanted to
organization.
organizational review, we could just pick a date. If we want to put it on
Right.
for August 11th, we can. August 11th is the date I intend, based on our last meeting, to invite Mr. Cabo, the president of the council, to come talk to us. So maybe we could dovetail into that a little bit.
Would be a good fit. What you mean with the city clerk? Is that what he's going to
That's-
talk about?
Yes.
So that could fall under that organizational piece. So we'll just do that on August the 11th and then decide the scope of it.
Yes.
Everybody agree? Police Department, section 6-9.
We decided that's an item, that was part of this agenda.
Right, and we're gonna do that at the next meeting, so is that the 11th or the following?
The 11th.
Okay. Other charter revisions.
Do you think it'd be too much to put number 1 on for August 11th? I think it's important. At least finding one that they're accurate. The referendum requirements.
611, Ms. Waller addressed this.
Oh, that's the percentage from 15%?
That's important to me.
Let's do it for the, okay. That would be, yeah, but when are we starting to run into that? Are we running into Labor Day weekend thing? No, we have a meeting. Okay. So we do that on the 25th? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, as long as it comes up, I lose.
Okay. What about this item about penalties for violating the charter?
Bob, I honestly think that doesn't really merit any discussion. We kicked it around the last meeting, and it's something that, the way that the charter is enforced, if people don't follow the charter, there are decisions that are made that way, votes that are taken that way are extra legal, challenged in court, municipality rules. So I honestly think that it doesn't even merit, an agenda item for us to discuss that.
But I believe that the state still has the whipping post law in effect, right? And we could adopt the whipping post law if you so desire. No? Not a good idea? Okay. Everybody agree, we're not gonna tackle this violating this penalties thing? I think this was a result of a public hearing, if I'm correct, right, Peter?
This is part of it, and this comes out of an officer.
Okay, so we're not gonna take that out.
Some of these are already.
Same for the removal of elected officers. We cannot do that. Revised, we've done this capital budget timing, and the process we've decided is outside the scope of this commission. Okay? So that's done. Favorable tax status in the charter. I understand it was a hot potato last week, and people decided they didn't want to do this.
closer to the initial.
That's correct.
Currently, the process for granting favorable tax status is what?
By judging conversation, but I have failed. So, still nothing. Favorable tax status.
Tax
Well,
breaks
We're
for
talking about
developers.
BRT.
We're talking about BRT.
That's it.
No, that's it.
Not necessarily BRT.
Or anybody
But
else.
that was the
does that.
example.
That's in an ordinance.
And I think what it is, what the intention here, Rick, was that tax, incentives, if you will, are given to, usually to corporations coming into the city that would generate a favorable impact on the community, providing jobs, et cetera, I think the concern came up when it was extended to residents who would acquire a condominium or an apartment or a house, that they would get a tax incentive to buying in a particular location in the community. I think some people viewed that different than an incentive that would benefit the overall community. And that's what it was put in. Should that be extended?
Well, that's by I believe, of the Connecticut General Statute authorizing municipalities to grant tax assessment deferrals under certain circumstances.
Mhm.
And what the city of Danbury has done is adopt an ordinance that describes those circumstances. So I don't think that's
Okay. So it's by ordinance, it's saying.
by ordinance based on enabling state statutes.
If we chose to do it, we could make it a charter. It's just a question. All right?
I think I would tend to yield to the desire of the part of the division to do something unless I can have an absolute prohibition, and I'm not aware of it.
Fair enough. So we could do it if we wanted to. Is there any interest in doing this? No. Moving on. This is the city indebtedness. And I put this in only to highlight that currently the only real cap on the city is the state statute of any given amount of indebtedness. I'm not talking about whether we float a bond issue of over $2.5 million or under $2.5 million. But the total indebtedness of the city, there is no limit other than the state statute. There is a policy which the city follows, which was in that original proposal that I had, which the director of finance said they could not implement with regard to bonding. But I don't understand why they couldn't do it that way when they're holding that with total indebtedness. Do we want to formalize the city policy that they're following, which measures, I think, a percentage of gross receipts, a percentage of per capita, and there's one other measurement that they go on. And by the way, other cities follow the same kind of measurements. It's contained, if you're interested, in a financial submission for the budget, and it's also in the audit report of the city. That's all the same. Without getting into that, the only limit is the state statute, which in rough numbers is $950,000. That's all this was trying to get to. If you don't feel that we need it, then we can scratch it off. Thoughts? Thoughts? People are very generous. Okay, we're going, move on. No, well, we've already taken care of that. On the borrowing
then we can let this stand as is.
Yes.
We've got more things to go through.
Oh, I understand.
All right.
Next